I'm Randy with Your Story, Des Moines, and today we're with the Des Moines Historical Society, and we're talking about something a lot of people don't know existed in Des Moines, and that's an old wooden racetrack. And the story behind this really goes back to the time of automobiles and horses and how they were overlapping. So Larry is going to tell us a little bit about the racetrack. And Larry, what year was it built?
It was built in 1915. It was built out in Valley Junction, and most people would know where Penn-Dixie Concrete Factory was. It was built to the west and south of that. It is a little south of the current fire station and the Hy-Vee at 19th and Grand. The track was a lease by the Des Moines Chamber of Commerce. It was called the Old Bennett Farm, and it was a 100-acre lease that lasted for 10 years. It was south of Railroad and a little east of Grand Avenue, and you had to enter the property through Fuller Road. Fuller Road did not go all the way through, and so to enter the track you had to take Fuller Road up from Grand Avenue and come back into the track area. It was actually owned by the Des Moines Chamber of Commerce, and the builder was the Prince Speedway Company, and they were the contractors that built the wooden speedway. Then they ran it, and the track was a mile long, had an infield that they used for parking, and they also had parking for a total of 6,000 cars at that facility.
So when I hear the word 1915 and I think about these old cars, we're really transitioning out of the horse and buggy era at that point, and cars are still kind of a novelty and fad. How fast did they go? How thrilling could these races really be?
Well, in actuality, the Des Moines Speedway held the speed record from 1915 until it was eclipsed 4 years later at the Indianapolis Speedway.
How many people could attend a race at the Des Moines Speedway?
There was seating for 10,000 and there was parking for 6,000 cars.
Larry, as we look at the history of the Wooden Racetrack in Des Moines, what was one of the motivations for it?
Previous tracks had shared their track with horses and buggies, and the cars were tearing up the track and a danger to horses and the buggy races. So they thought that the wooden track would be a good alternative, and you could get higher speeds and not have the same constraints of a brick track or a dirt track.
What did it take to put that track together?
The Prince Speedway Company put together this track in 6 weeks' time. They had a crew of 250 workers, and the construction cost was $100,000. The track size was a mile-long banked track. It took 980,000 board feet of wood. It took 96 box cars that the railroad brought in to put the track together. There was 50 tons of nails that were used, and it produced a track that had speeds in excess of 100 miles an hour.
How long was the racetrack in existence?
Only 2 years. There were a couple things that affected the run time. One was that during the inaugural race they had some people die. That waned the interest to come to the track. Second thing was that the Des Moines Speedway would weather with rain and snow, as well as the tires going over the long-grained wood and tear the wood up, causing splinters to peel away from the wood itself.
So they're eventually turned into a safety issue then with the raceway because of the wear and tear on lumber that is not maintained or painted or whatever, and I can only imagine how slick it would be if it was painted. So we know the length of the track, we've talked about how much lumber it took to build the track. How wide was the track?
The track was 48 feet wide, and it was banked 10 degrees on the straightaway and 40 degrees on the turns.
One of the stories about the board track, and we've already touched on how really fragile they could be because of the wood and the weathering they took with the cold weather and the snow and then the sun beating on them, that these tracks would actually fall apart during the races.
Yeah, I read a piece on the internet that said that workers would try and repair the track and they would stick a flag up where the hole was. Now just imagine trying to drive down the road at 30 miles an hour and avoiding a pothole, and on the track going 100 miles an hour and avoiding the workers and the flags.
So according to what you read online, they were repairing the track while the race was going on?
That's what was written on the internet.
Well, even if it's not true, it's a great story, but there's a certain amount of that where you gotta kind of wonder, maybe it did happen. One of the other things that we want to do is we want to go talk to a guy that we call Skeeter, and Skeeter has a pretty good example of the car that would have raced on the track back in the day. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Excellent. Now, the reason that we're with Skeeter today is because you have a car. It's a 1926. Tell me the rest of it.
Model T boat tail speedster.
All right. Now, do you know how many of these were out in the world? Were there a lot of these? I mean,
this is not a factory-built vehicle. The main components of it is an original Model T, and our fathers, grandfathers, great uncles hot rodded them, and they would take the old bodies and cut them up and play with them like we do today, and the boat tail speedster was a version of that. Ford produced a body that was known as the Mercury that was shaped similar to this, and they are very rare bird, very highly sought after item today. But there are a lot of speedsters in existence, primarily with either trunks or beer keg type gas tanks on the back of the seat, and those are called buckboards.
Now, one of the reasons that we're talking to you today is because the Des Moines Historical Society, even though it was West Des Moines, there used to be an old wooden track. This car is probably the most similar that we're going to find that raced on that, correct?
Close. 10 years younger. The board track was in existence 15, 16. This is 26. And this is a much smaller car than would have raced at the boards. The boards would have been 6-cylinder and 8-cylinder motors, more similar to the blue car over here next to us, the Mormons and the Fronties, those type motors, because we run at 100 miles an hour for an hour, hour and a half, or 2 hours at a time. Quite frankly, the Model T motor wasn't capable of doing that at that point in time.
So what do you think the top speed of this was back in the day?
Back in the day, on the roads they run on the racetrack, 60, 65, 70 mile an hour, proper gearing.
So how often do you get this out and take it for a spin?
Quite frequently. I've driven it every month of the year in Iowa.
Some of those days were pretty cold then, weren't they?
Yes, sir. Some of them are a little damp.
Does that cause you to look like the old airplane baron with the sunglasses?
Well, perhaps this would be the look that you might be referring to.
That would be what I'm asking about.
As we call this, my Rocky the Squirrel flying helmet.
It's a good look on you. So talk to us a little bit about how you ended up with the car. Now, I know that you ended up finding it, and so you don't know a lot of the history, but it's interesting the fact that you bought it.
I found the car on eBay. At the time I located the car, I was in the process of restoring a 1924 truck that my grandfather bought new. The last day that truck was driven was the day I was born. Piece of family history. And I was nearing retirement age, getting the bug, and I found this little gal on eBay, and it fit me so well because it's a hot rod. I'm a hot rodder. I'm an old race car guy. I'm a still race car guy. And quite frankly, it went cheap, and I ended up buying the thing. And I bought home, and I have absolutely had a ball with it. And at the time I bought it, I was near retirement as an over-the-road trucker. And in a rest area in Indiana, I picked a brochure advertising an antique car hill climb in Newport, Indiana. And in '05, I went for the first time, and I've been hooked. I've been there every year but one since then, and I was out on the road, couldn't make it back in.
Does it feel a lot faster than 67 miles an hour because it's so low to the ground and open?
Well, not so much that, but because of the handling characteristics. It's like a water bug. It gets to bouncing around. 65 in this will make you go to church Sunday morning and thank God that you're still alive.
So Skeeter, you're involved today with the Des Moines Historical Society. How did you get involved to bring this beautiful car up here to show it off?
Well, we can blame Monica for this.
Okay.
I was minding my own business, innocent citizen, attending
And I can see that with you, yeah.
the Good Guys event here at Des Moines at the fairgrounds in July. And I came back and one of the pennants was laying in the car. And my son said, well, this lady come by and wanted to give you this pennant. She'll be back and talk to you. Well, then Monica comes back and tells me what her involvement is with the Historical Society. And she had picked my car out as being the most like what might have raced at the board track and began to fill me in on it. And one thing led to another, and a little coercion, a little volunteering, and here we are.
So, well, it's great to have you on board today and to bring this up from, where do you live at?
I'm 100 miles southeast here, near Tomo Fairfield area.
So that's commitment to help out the Des Moines Historical Society and get a show off your car too, right?
Well, that and I guess I'm somewhat of an armchair historian. I enjoy it. I've got a lot of family history, and I told Monica today, I'm not sure what we were talking about. I said, this is kind of strange that I'm giving you a history lesson.
Well, and then we can share with everybody else, and that's kind of the goal with all this.
And I think part of what kicked this off in earlier conversation with Monica and the group was talking about my family's involvement in racing. My father started racing in 1949, and some of the guys that my dad raced with are in the Hall of Fame at Knoxville. I've raced in 10 states in Canada. It's a long racing history in my family, and it just that, and apparently someone thinks I spin a yarn.
With the family history in racing, does this still help fill a niche for you?
Oh, absolutely.
Racing over the years.
That, and I need to point out, did you notice the number 7 on my radiator?
Yes.
Well, I'm asked quite frequently, what's the significance of the 7? And there are a few that says, is that the Seagram's 7? And I said, absolutely, and that's a tribute to my father. My father's race cars were number 7, and they were painted with the Seagram 7 because my father enjoyed Seagram 7 whiskey.
So they're a great story about something on the car today.
A little family tradition.
What's your drink of choice?
Seagram 7.
Okay, I want to make sure. So we're keeping it in the family. Is it more of a thrill for you to be out and race the car and do your hill climb with it, or to get out and be able to show people, you know, this great car and tell them a little bit about it?
Well, my first love is the racing. The first love is the racing. Always will, always has been, always will be.
So when your kids finally pry the car keys away from you, is this the last one they're going to take away from you?
Perhaps.
It's a great car, and thank you for bringing it out to be part of the Des Moines Historical Society today.
Pleasure.
So Larry, as we wrap this up today, we had a great conversation with Skeeter, who brought his car up, which is a pretty good example of some of the cars that would have raced on the old Wooden Racetrack. What were some of the reasons the track ultimately failed?
The lack of attendance. And the financial burden that placed on the track as far as operations. And there was safety issues, the track tearing apart, and over the long haul, all tracks, wooden, ceased existence by 1928. Some of the tracks got ruts, and you could almost drive the race without steering. So from a thrill standpoint, it was kind of mundane.
So what happened to the wood once they finally disassembled the track? I mean, you said many of the tracks closed by 1928. Our track in Des Moines closed by 1917, so we were way ahead of these tracks closing. What happened to all that wood? What happened to the material from the track?
Well, some of the wood was sold to contractors that were building barns and residences in the Valley Junction area to defray the cost of building the track. And many of the houses that were in Old Valley Junction are products of the racetrack itself.
Great information today, Larry, and thank you for sharing the story of the Wooden Racetrack in Des Moines.
Appreciate being here.
Hopefully you've had a good time and you've learned a little bit about Des Moines history with the old Wooden Racetrack that was really Des Moines, but it was in Valley Junction, so part of West Des Moines. Larry, thank you for all the information today. And if you want to get involved, if you want to find out more about Des Moines history, you can join the Des Moines Historical Society. We'd love to have you be part of it. Larry, how can they get connected?
All they have to do is go to the internet. Our internet address is www.desmoineshistoricalsociety.org, and there's information there about how to join and other information about upcoming events.
And if you have a great story for the Des Moines Historical Society that we should look into, go ahead, get in touch with us. You can again do it through our website. We'd love to hear from you soon, and thank you for watching.